Hey guys, welcome to this episode of the Bionicle Inspiration Series where we're talking about a few things and a few more mocks this time. So, I had a request to do an episode on custom parts, painted parts, cutting parts, 3D printing, all of the stuff that you either consider completely sacrilegious and you should never do with Bionicle, or you are in the percent that goes, oh, that's really cool, that's really fun. And maybe you're on the fence, maybe you've never done it, maybe you're firmly against it or firmly for it. But either way, let's have a little chat about it today and explore some of the really cool mocks from the community that use cut, painted, 3D printed, bootleg parts, all that sort of stuff. Because there's definitely a lot of really cool opportunities to have when you explore that. And there's various degrees to which you can do it too. So let's jump right on in and take a look at the first mock, which is called Mockstern by Mockstern. This is, of course, his self-mock. So before we get into some of the custom stuff, let's talk about some of the things that are definite highlights about this mock. I really like the torso design. It's very similar to the old Toa Mata torsos, kind of having those two beams that is just making up the entire waist. I think it's a very unique and very clever design. Obviously, too, be reasonably sturdy. It would hold everything up quite nicely and gives a very sort of robotic look. I think it's very cool. Also, really like what he's done with the feet down here, kind of inverting those Exoforce hands and then putting some of those mnemonic tubes there is a very nice way to create a very robotic looking foot. And I think that's very clever and very cool. And there's a lot of other sort of mechanical details throughout the legs here, which looks fantastic. Now, going into some of the custom parts, as we can see here, the two shoulder pads that came on like Onawa G2 have been painted silver. And then one of them has a nice sort of stripe through the middle there. Now, I think that's really cool, just adding a really subtle, nice detail like that with the stripe across the torso to just add a little something extra. You could, of course, always achieve that with stickers too, so you could keep it custom and do that. Or you, of course, could do it with a little additional paint or a Sharpie or something like that. Speaking of Sharpies, when I first saw this mask, I thought that it was the Tahu G2 mask that is traditionally red, or of course you can have it in trans orange as well, or gold, and I thought that was just Sharpied over with a silver Sharpie. Now, that has been done before in the past with various other masks. Some other people in the Bionicle community have simply Sharpied over masks to get them in the color they want, and I think that's really cool. It's a very cheap, cost-effective way. You know, paint can be a little bit hard to use, and depending on the quality of paint that you have, it can peel and not look so good, and sometimes the colors don't quite flesh with Lego. So using some Sharpies is not necessarily a bad idea. So you can always give that a go, and you don't necessarily just have to do it on masks. You could, of course, do it on those torso pieces or any part for that matter. Speaking of which, one thing that is and isn't, painting a part, if you have any ball joints that are ever really like just not sticking, like they're very loose, just get a Sharpie and draw around the ball itself on that ball joint, and you'll make it a little bit stronger. It sounds weird, but it works, trust me, I've tried it. So yeah, I originally thought that mask was Sharpied. However, turns out this is a mock from Shapeways. Now, I'll get into that in a second, just round off talking about this mock because it's kind of transitioned to the next mock topic on Shapeways here. But I think that's really cool, just to use one or two pieces, whether it's a mask or just a couple other colors, to really enhance a mock. And that's one end of cutting and painting parts, just doing one or two things because maybe you really want to use a specific part, but it just doesn't come in the right color. So why not paint it or color it in with a Sharpie or whatever, or on a pre-existing part, paint in or draw in a few little extra details. Maybe you yourself are an artist and you're very good with a Sharpie or a paintbrush, and so you can get some really nice details in. If not, maybe you've got a friend who's very creative and maybe they could do it for you, or you can visit various other websites that I will cover later in the episode. So let's move on to the next mock, which is called Toa Unuku G2 version 2 by, of course, Unuku. Again, another self-mock. What is this, self-mocks version 2? Anyway, so let's quickly talk about Shapeways. Now, both this mock and the last mock, of course, use a mask from Shapeways. So, for those of you who have done 3D printing, or at least know of 3D printing, there are various websites, various subsections on the website Shapeways where you can find instructions or places to buy things that are made through 3D printing. And, of course, in the links in the description, I'll include some links to those websites. So if you are interested, go check them out. But essentially, what these websites on Shapeways do is there are various builders who offer different masks or other Bionicle pieces that are 3D printed. And the quality is pretty freaking decent. And also, you're able to get some Bionicle masks that didn't appear in actual sets, or an older Bionicle mask with a sort of newer updated thing. So for example, you can get a Krakan, the old Makuta mask, but you can get it in G2 style, so it fits on a G2 head. Or you can get a few, like a mirror redesign here. You can get all sorts of different masks that either did exist or didn't exist, or existed in the Bionicle universe, but we never got an official version of. Also, there's all sorts of different things like articulated Mudder torsos, or various different bone types and shapes that are perfect for mocking. Now, obviously, that's up to you whether or not you want to use non-Lego parts. And I know a lot of people are very against using anything that isn't specifically Lego. But if you're interested, maybe take a look because there's some very, very cool parts here. They're also not too expensive. Most of them seem to be about sort of anywhere from $5 to $10. Some, of course, maybe like 20 or a little bit more than that, but you'll be paying for a little bit of a additional quality or a different color or something that might be a little bit more difficult. But also bear in mind, they're just 3D printed. And I'm sure if you take a look around your school or university, it probably will have a 3D printer. A lot of places seem to these days. So maybe you can play around with a 3D printer there, maybe learn a thing or two about 3D printing. Maybe it'll help you in the future with other things. And maybe you yourself could design your own mask. Or you can just digitally print it for free and not tell anyone about it and get a free thing that you can use for Lego. Why the hell not? So yeah, definitely check out Shapeways because it's a very clever and interesting thing, especially too with the very limited amount of masks that we get these days in new sets, or the very limited amount of new parts that we get in really cool colors and unique things. It's a really nice alternative. Sure, it isn't exactly purist, but hey, give it a go. So going back to Unuku's mock here, it uses a Shapeways mask. Now, as you can see, the color is slightly off compared to the normal black. However, that's a little bit different depending on what mask you get. There are always different opportunities. You yourself could paint it and get it to match the right color, or you could get an artist to paint it for you, anything like that. And so, yeah, really cool to see a mask like that used on a mock. It's just a very simple CCBS frame, but still looks fantastic and really pops with that Shapeways mask. So that's awesome. Really, really like the staff as well. It's very primarily system, but it looks fantastic. Doesn't use too many parts. They sort of appear to be based around some of the system harpoon gun pieces, and that's sort of forming the overall triangular shape of that staff. And it looks fantastic. So a great little design. Really helps the overall frame pop and looks fantastic. So kind of transitioning into another company similar to Shapeways, although not necessarily a company or anything fan-made. But if we look at the torso here, it uses a sort of odd blue colored torso that is a typical sort of CCBS torso design that we've seen in various Hero Factory and Bionicle things. But like I said, that color seems slightly off. What's up with that? So another thing you might want to check out that a whole bunch of builders have been using. Some, again, are firmly against it, and some are experimenting with it, seeing what it's like. If you head on to AliExpress, you can find some Bootleg Bionicle. Now, again, give it a go. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll be cool. If not, don't pick it up and ignore this. But a lot of these Bootleg Bionicle parts are somewhat decent quality. Some of them aren't. Some of them are. Depends which ones you pick up. But a lot of them offer really unique parts as well as recolors of parts that we haven't normally got. So let's take a look at this photo here. And we can see a whole bunch of traditional CCBS bones and shells and things in colors that we've never seen before. And they're relatively close on the color spectrum to Lego official colors. And that's fantastic. So really cool to have the opportunity to be able to use some of those parts. And given that they are decent enough quality that they are compatible with Lego and work well with Lego, hey, maybe it's worth picking them up. Or it's not because it's not Lego. But that is totally up to you. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just showing you that there's a few other alternatives. So maybe check it out or stick with traditional Lego. Totally up to you. That is definitely one alternative that you can play with, is heading over to AliExpress. I will include links in the description if you want to check out a couple of the different models, because some of them offer some really unique masks or really unique colors or really unique pieces. So give that a look if you are interested. But yeah, great to see both those sort of things used in one mock here on Unuku. Fantastic job, Unuku. We're going to move on to another mock here, which is by Brickthing and is called Toa. It's called Unata, as a part of the team, the Toa Hukai, and he is the hunter, master of claw. I hold death in my hands. But yeah, this is a fantastic mock. Brickthing has done a whole various Toa team, which you'll have to check the links in the description to see the rest of them, because they are fantastic Toa designs, so definitely check them out. This mock is awesome on so many levels, because not only does it use teal, which is a beautiful Lego color that used to be extinct but is finally coming back, thank the Lego gods, but it uses teal in a very nice way. It's simply just done on the mask, and on various other parts of the body, just with minifigure hands and a couple system plates and grills and minifigure arms and things like that. And that way you're able to use teal, a very fantastic and fun color, but he's only used it in small quantities with really tiny parts. There's probably only maybe, 10, 15 teal parts on there. And so you're able to use a really awesome color, and it contrasts so nicely with dark red. So great to see teal used, and great to see so little teal used, but it still is a primary color on that mock and looks fantastic. Also, so cool to see the Smorg wings and tail used on this mock. Now, these parts came with the Dragon Smog from The Hobbit. So in the Lego Hobbit sets, we got a sort of Smorg figurine animal thing, and the wings and tail have been repurposed here to sort of make a sort of waistcoat thing with the sort of tail sort of swerving up as some sort of awesome looking cloth cape design clothing thing. I'm not necessarily sure what it is, but it looks super cool. And that's awesome. Not everything needs to make sense on a mock. If it just looks cool, I'm down. Now, let's get into the custom stuff. I'm sure by now you've noticed that this mask does not actually appear in that color teal, and it also has a really sick paint job. So, this is a mask that was commissioned by Model Masks. Some of you might have heard of this guy before. He is an extremely nice guy who has his own website where you can buy standard masks for $8 or sort of super high detailed masks from $9 to $10, or you can sort of customize some masks. So essentially, he repaints masks in whatever color you want. You can commission it yourself, or he sells some already pre-done on his website. So again, you can have a really standard recolor, or you can just, add a little nice detail into there. Maybe, you want to have that sort of tribal effect like this mock has. Or you want to go a little bit higher detail, and maybe you want to sort of do a little bit like a Layra and have a whole galaxy on the side of a mask, or you want to have a sort of multicolored design everywhere, so you can pay for that and do that yourself. Or you can do something super awesome like adding Kupaka's scope eye on the side of a different mask entirely. So he has a lot of different opportunities and possibilities for masks, and that's fantastic. And again, you can select from mocks that he's already got there, or you can commission something and he can make it for you. Relatively cheap, really awesome result, and you can get the custom paint job or color that you want for any mask or any other Lego piece. Here's a really cool model that he's done, simply recoloring and painting up the original Gully G2 set. And here he's sort of added all this sort of moss and all sorts of other sort of underwater elements affecting her sort of armor and everything, and it looks fantastic. He's added so much extra detail and extra depth with the paint job and everything. It looks amazing. And he's able to do that with any part, any mask, anything with Lego. So if you send it in and commission it, he'll do it for you. So many different opportunities and so many cool things that he does. And it can really enhance a mock or an additional armor part or anything on a mock. So yeah, getting a paint job done from him would be awesome and a great way to really drastically improve a mask or a mock on its own. And it's definitely a great example of that done with this mock by Brick thing. So fantastic work. Great to see that mask used in such a cool way with an awesome paint job on such an awesome mock. Now, so far, we've mainly been seeing very limited paint jobs or custom things or bootleg stuff that's only been 1 or 2 parts on a mock. So maybe about 90% of it has been non-custom. So now we're going to look at something that's on the other end of the spectrum and is very heavily custom. So this mock here is by Clever Crow and is called, now I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, but it's called Dominial the Sundered King Somnifrian Ancient. Something like that. Now this mock is utterly beautiful, but it uses a lot of painted parts. Pretty much the entire white side of this mock, because it's kind of got this sort of yin-yang thing with half of it being black and half of it being white, pretty much all of that white side uses some colored parts. So taking a look at the hand here, you can see some of those parts have been colored, some of those Hero Factory bones there, as we can see. Taking a look at the arm, there's a painted mask. Taking a look at the shoulder, well, most of that's actually pretty good. Looking at the legs, some of those parts are coloured in. You've got a Vizon mask there coloured in. Both of these Toxic Reaper heads are, of course, coloured white as well. So there's a lot of painted parts here that takes up the majority of the mock. And I've had a few arguments with people, well, not arguments, I had a few conversations with people where we've been talking about, is painting parts of a mock, is that cool or is that weird or whatever? And a few arguments I've had about it have been, if it's just 1 or 2 parts, that's fine. If it's just a slight thing to improve a mock, I'm down with that. But if you paint too many pieces on a mock, then I don't like it. But then I've also heard the complete other end of the spectrum where people go, you know what? If you've painted heaps of parts and done all sorts of things that I traditionally wouldn't do on a mock, but you've made an amazing mock as a result. Man, that's cool. You do you. And also at the end of the day, if it makes you happy, do it. You know, who cares what other people think? Mocking is about you having fun at the end of the day. So don't change the way that you want to do something just because someone else says you should do it the other way. That's not what this is about. This is about having fun and relishing in the awesome things that you build. Also, it will mean that you don't have to worry so much about making thousands of dollars worth of bricklink orders because you need the exact right part. Maybe if you repainted a part, you'd have exactly what you need. Now let's talk a little bit about this mock. It's so freaking awesome. Clever Crow has done a whole bunch of different edits throughout this, making this mock even cooler, putting it in all sorts of poses, making it look super, super cool, super, super menacing, and it's awesome. This sort of half and half effect is great and is very easy to manage given the size and scale of it. So if it was a little bit smaller, it might be a little hard to get that sort of nice split down the middle, but because it's a bit bigger, you've got a little bit more room to play with. Also cool to see a dual-headed mock. Don't see enough of those. That's fantastic. It's also got two sort of pop-out cannons on the back there that seem to sort of rest on the back. Very, very cool. Lovely little addition like that. Great to see these big menacing claw hands using those sort of claw parts there, whatever they're from, whatever they're called. Great to see such a big menacing hand design like that fits the overall aesthetic of this mock so well. There's so much going on with this, and it's so awesome to see a painted mock look so cool and pull off those painted parts so effectively. So that's about it for today's episode. Hopefully, you've seen a few different options that you yourself could take for experimenting with painting parts or 3D printed parts, all that sort of thing, and you yourself can maybe try it out. Who knows? Of course, there's also the other argument of this, which I guess will be a future episode of cutting parts. So, who knows? Maybe you could do that in future. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Maybe you can try out some of these things you tried for yourself, or stick to being purist, totally fine as well. Be sure to check the links in the description for the mocks that you saw in today's episode. There's some fantastic mocks, and some of the other things these guys have built are fantastic. So be sure to check those out. Also in the links in the description, you can send me a few messages because that's the best way to let me know of future themes that you want to see in these shows or future mocks that you want to see on the show. So definitely be sure to do that. Otherwise, thank you very much. Hopefully this episode inspired you. If it did, be sure to send over some of the things that you built as a result. I'd love to see them. Otherwise, have a fantastic rest of the day. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye, guys.